에그리테크 UK 세션 이번에 진행할 순서는 에그리테크의 여정, 전략에서 성공으로라는 주제입니다. 베린다 클라크 에그리테크의 이사님께서 진행을 맡아 주실 건데요. 기조연설 통해서 오늘 첫 문을 열어주셨습니다. 패널로는 엘리자베스 워햄 영국 국제통상부 농업총괄 박사님, 칼럼 머리 이노베이트 UK 농식품 본부장님 두 분께서 함께 하실 예정입니다. And now, let's start.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and it is a huge honour and pleasure to be here from the UK. And I think I speak for my fellow panellists when I say we very much wish we were with you in person. It really isn't the same. We're here in the UK, it's nearly 9 o'clock in the morning. We would love to have been with you hearing the exciting talks and discussions today. However, we're here with you very much in spirit, and we have a panel discussion. I personally was in Seoul in 2019. I was very fortunate to be invited to speak at the Asian Leadership Forum, and it was very clear the ambition in South Korea to really embrace agri-tech and to invest and to grow the agri-tech ecosystem in South Korea. And the plans that we've heard about since are really very exciting and inspiring, and we hope the UK case study will help further that journey. So we'd like to share the UK's agri-tech story over the last 8 to 10 years, and I think it's very striking the parallels around agri-tech across the world. So we talk to clusters and geographies globally, and it's very striking that the same kinds of challenges seem to be presented globally. How to encourage farmers to adopt new technologies, how to provide an enabling environment for the development of those technologies, and the interoperability of hardware and software on farm to make it just very easy for farmers to integrate new technologies into their current practices. And of course, the topic of today's conversation, how artificial intelligence and machine learning can be integrated into that system and to really unlock that potential, not least how to get the data sets to train the algorithms in the different contexts. And we see this the world over. So it feels we're united in a global opportunity with really very similar quests that we're all on together. So one of the things that we'd like to unpack in this discussion is really what is the role of government in enabling the agri-tech journey of a nation, in their role in de-risking the technology development and adoption, and how to provide that enabling environment for this to happen. And the case studies that we're going to talk to you about today really reflect this journey that both Innovate UK, and you'll hear a little bit about that, and the UK's Department for International Trade have been on, and how that has got us to the position we're in now. If anybody would like to ask any questions, I think there is a mechanism to do so. So please do submit your questions, and we will try and pick those up and ask those of the panelists. So without further ado, Callum, may I start with you? Innovate UK as an organisation has really held the pen, as it were, for a lot of the agri-tech development in the UK. Can I take you back maybe 10 years and share the thinking with us as to what was the mood music like in government? What led to the thinking that there needed to be this journey of agri-tech in the UK?
Well, thank you very much for that, Belinda. We started to recognise that agriculture and food were critical to the success of the UK economy. So Innovate UK, being a public body that's funded by government, is really been set up to try and drive productivity and economic growth within the sector. And agriculture, being such a fundamental part of that economy, was recognised as being one of those key areas to focus on. We don't, in Innovate UK, we don't just focus on agriculture, we do cover a number of other sectors, and the cross-fertilisation that occurs between sectors is absolutely key to bring in the capability from other dynamic technologies into a sector that has been seen to be a little bit traditional in the past. So what we did, we recognized that there was a real desire to progress and drive forward the development of the sector. but that we needed to reinvest in that sector to try and increase our opportunities and to drive forward the uptake of new technologies across the farming community. So we started with a dedicated series of thematic support competitions and calls where we granted specific technology subsectors within agriculture to really test the water and see where we could go. Subsequent to that, we recognized that there was very definitely real capability and capacity within the sector to embrace this challenge. So a group within government got together and developed what we'll go on to talk about, which was the UK strategy for agricultural technologies. That was really designed to really try and significantly increase economic performance. It was really trying to create a world-class hubs of expertise. It was designed to really boost our international competitiveness and to bring a transformational change and enabling the global challenges to be addressed, and those being the whole question of sustainability and resilience. So all of that came together to help us take this forward.
Thank you. And I think interestingly, it was a cross-departmental effort, was it not? It wasn't just in a department for agriculture as it was. Can you just unpack that for us?
Yeah, absolutely right. It started within the Department of Business, working with our Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and also engaged with our Department for International Development. And colleagues, Elizabeth being one from DIT, Department of International Trade, came together in a cross-Whitehall working group to develop this strategy. And it was largely led by colleagues within the Office of Life Science. Two ministers, obviously three ministers, I should say, sponsored the whole process. So very much an inclusive philosophy.
Great, thank you. And Elizabeth, if I can turn to you, how was it in the Department for International Trade as that very exciting conversation was happening? How easy was it to get all those different ministers and departments aligned around agri-tech?
Well, the key part, as you say, was aligning the departments and the ministers. The team that was involved from the Department of International Trade was actually the Food and Drink team. And they realized that we needed to focus a bit more on the agriculture to deliver the food and drink. So one of the actions from the strategy was to actually set up a new team within the Department for International Trade that was focused purely on agri-tech, because it's quite a different sector from the food and drink sector. And they felt we needed the right expertise. And also, as part of that journey, we needed to actually help upskill our colleagues overseas on what agri-tech meant and how to work within the sector to help drive that growth that Callum spoke about, and how to increase investment within the sector to capitalize on our science base and what that can bring to the sector and to agriculture. So the role of the agri-tech team is working with overseas investors, helping them invest in the UK, but also working with different government departments, colleagues on collaboration on the science base, and then we help UK-based companies export overseas. All the while working with the colleagues in different countries. But the mandate from cross-government was critical for us because that gave the rationale and the justification for the existence of the team, but also it enabled us to look a bit more at how we help food security, not always the opportunity where you get the biggest trade and investment, but crucial to helping address some of those challenges that different countries face.
Thank you. And are there any particular lessons, Elizabeth, that having gone through the process, any advice as to how lessons that you learned, having been so close to that process, that you would pass on to someone else wanting to start that journey, another nation looking to start that journey?
For me, the biggest lesson was having the commitment from the different government departments, and you actually looked at all aspects of that supply chain, whether it's development, whether it's business, whether it's innovation, and whether it's trade and investment. And the fact that we did have a leadership council that had oversight of that strategy, and therefore there was accountability and reporting from the different government departments, and I think that was critical.
Thank you. And Callum, any lessons from your side? Because there was quite a lot of money associated with this, wasn't it, with the strategy?
Yes, that's absolutely right. We had an overall investment at the start of the strategy of 160 million pounds. I'm sorry, I don't know the exchange rate to South Korea. The critical thing that we felt, given our particular focus, is that business had to be taken with us, that it was important that business established a co-investment in this whole process, and that it wasn't a case of government trying to fund all the initiatives at 100%. So working with industry, working with the associated businesses, both up and along the whole food supply chain, was very, very important. And fundamental to it, of course, is recognizing that we needed to take farmers and growers with us to make sure that the technologies and the priorities that we were trying to establish reflected the needs and wants and desires of those primary producers. So that engagement very early on was absolutely critical.
Right, thank you. So if maybe we can kind of fast forward 5 years from the launch of the strategy, what had been achieved by that 5-year milestone, Callum, and then I'll come to Elizabeth on that.
Well, we have supported an enormous number of individual projects through a responsive mode mechanism that grant aided individual projects to tackle many different aspects of primary production that would embrace everything from animal science to crop science, thinking about the advanced breeding technologies, engineering solutions, and so on. So a lot of individual projects have been funded, and a lot of those projects are made up of a consortia of business and academia, and the business partners within those consortia have gone on to grow, increase employment, drive profits to their bottom line, and thereby deliver fiscal returns back to the UK economy. In that sense, we have estimated that the overall return to the UK economy from the investment in these projects is of the order of 5 to 6 times the investment that we have put in through grant aid, in some cases even more. The other thing that we have done is we have established new infrastructure. Part of the 160 million I mentioned was directed towards rebuilding capability and infrastructure within the ecosystem of agricultural technology and innovation within the UK. And we've established 4 centres for agricultural innovation that span the UK and have created a world-class hub of expertise in 4 critical areas. And we can come on to talk about those as you see fit.
Excellent, thank you. And Elizabeth, 5 years into the strategy, how did your conversations with global partners, how did that help you or enable you to do things better by having that strategy behind you 5 years into its implementation?
The strategy gave us the direction and the drive to work with our colleagues that are based in embassies overseas and to help upskill them on the concept of agri-tech, but also for them to have the conversations with ministries of agriculture locally to better understand where there are opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for joint events, missions, and I think we're now working with about 40 different countries in that context, with experts based in the embassies that understand the sector, and then they work very closely with the team back in London.
Interesting. Do you see any other markets or any other countries that have a national strategy for agri-tech, as it were, or do you think the UK is unique in that?
I think it's unique in the way it was set up and how it's being delivered. There are other countries that have strategies for agri-tech. It is gaining momentum globally, and there's a lot more interest in the opportunity that the technology provides.
Okay, thank you. So when I was in Seoul, I was talking to a number of professors from universities who were very keen on the idea of infrastructure and science parks. So Callum, can we just take you back? You mentioned the agri-tech centres. Would you like to just introduce us to those 4 centres with a little bit of information about what they do and their business model?
Yes, certainly, thanks. The agri-tech centres, as they're collectively known, there are 4 of them, and the process we designed to try and establish the priorities for establishing these centres was largely a competitive process where we invited industry to come together with academia and effectively pitch their ideas for the priorities that they saw for the sector. And we had a significant number of applications that ultimately we had to filter them down to a manageable cohort that would share in the distribution of the initial 80 or 90 million pounds that we had available. Clearly, we couldn't have, we couldn't fund everything. The perception was that we didn't want to spread money too thinly. So we effectively asked the centres, the proposals that came forward that aligned with each other, to think about working together. And the bottom line is that we've established 4 agri-tech centres. The first and preordained centre was Agrimetrics. Now, Agrimetrics is designed to effectively handle the very large data sets that exist across agriculture, and to help us analyze, synthesize, integrate those data sets to the benefit and utilization of business partners across the sector. So that very first centre was established back in 2015 and has been running very, very successfully since then. The other 3 centres, as I say, were drawn together through this competitive process. The first one was a centre that focuses on engineering and precision innovation. And that is known as AgriEpi. That centre is based in York. It has geographical spread with a significant number of partners, and it embraces the challenge of trying to measure variance across all of our production systems, and in so doing, it has established a significant number of satellite farms that have been instrumented to be able to carry out that analysis and then take forward the variance and think about the engineering solutions that would come to resolve the challenges there. Another centre was Crop Health and Protection, known as CHAP. Clearly, that is all about the crop production environment, thinking about the health, the agronomy, the nutrition of crops, and trying to establish ways in which we can significantly improve the productivity in our broadacre arable production systems, but also in our horticultural sector and in some of the challenges that exist internationally. The 4th centre was CL. Now, it's a very large consortium that have come together and created, I think what I'm right in saying, it's the largest academic and specialist livestock research hub in Europe, where it pulls together the expertise around livestock production and tries to deliver the kind of support and technologies that are required to enhance productivity in what is a very, very important sector to UK agricultural production. some 70% of our land mass is agriculture, and some 70% of that agriculture is grassland. So livestock production is very important, but so too is our monogastric production system. And CL works across all of that. Now, each of the centres have slightly different business models. Some of them are membership based. In the case of Agri-Epi and CHAP, for example, the livestock centre CL tends to operate on making the assets available to partners, and they receive something that would be akin to a royalty from the utilisation of these assets. But they're all valid, they all work well, and they've all been seriously engaged with and embraced by our industrial sector.
And to that point, they're actually earning industrial revenues, are they not? They're not all government. It's not all government spend. There is industrial revenue being generated.
No, absolutely right, Belinda. The original idea was that the centres would effectively end up being 100% self-sustaining by generating that revenue stream from industry. I think with the benefit of hindsight, we came to recognise that actually these centres deliver a lot of public good as well. That isn't necessarily something that is going to be bought and paid for by individual businesses, but that society as a whole will absolutely benefit from. So our model now is to take them towards the point where they're going to be roughly 50% self-sustaining and roughly 50% funded for the public good element.
Sure, thank you. So Elizabeth, I'm guessing once you'd had the centres kind of in your portfolio, as it were, with the messaging around the UK's agri-tech capabilities, you were very keen to go and talk to the rest of the world about that. Do you have, in your experience, where would you say are the key sort of agri-tech clusters of excellence globally? Who are the key partners of choice that would be sort of connecting best in class with all this kind of amazing infrastructure? Do you have any particular markets or countries that you would single out?
It's very difficult to single out the specific markets because it very much depends on the types of science and innovation. There's obviously quite a bit of collaboration on the science and innovation with Canada and New Zealand. What we're seeing is also a growth in expertise in some of the different parts of precision agriculture, with a lot of growth in Latin America and other parts. We're also working closely with Australia, New Zealand. It just varies. And I think the big issue is it's more about collaboration on the scientific development, which is important. And then it's how we then bring those technologies to market.
Yeah, I think that the message that I hear, certainly from the Department for International Trade, is that the UK is very much open for business, and it's with the right collaborative partners, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions have come in from the audience, so thank you very much for your questions, and please keep them coming. There's a question that, Callum, I'm going to pass over to you, if I may, around the criteria that were used in selecting agri-tech projects, and a very good question around how to measure impact. Would you like to offer a response to that question, please?
Okay. The way in which we select the projects that were funded, inevitably when proposals or competitions are opened, we are grossly oversubscribed. I think we're currently funding perhaps 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 projects. But the way in which we take things forward is we have independent assessment. It is not the members of staff within Innovate UK that carry out the assessment. We have a very large panel of highly capable academic and industry specialists within the agri-food ecosystem. And what we do is we allocate each project to 5 independent assessors, 2 academics, one of whom is an absolute specialist in the subject being proposed, and 3 business or industry representatives, again, one of which is absolutely a specialist in the subject, but non-conflicted. And they independently and anonymously assess and score the proposal as it comes through. And once we've gone through all of the proposals, we end up with a ranked list. We draw a quality line where we do not fund proposals that haven't achieved a certain benchmark, let's say 75%. And despite the fact that the proposals that come in are all asking for different sums of money, we start at the top of the list, we go down through the highest ranked projects effectively until we run out of money. Now, if we run out of money above the quality line, that's great. These are the projects that get funded, and there's unfortunately some disappointed good projects that don't. If we don't run out of money until we hit the quality line, we stop at the quality line. We don't fund bad projects. So that's the way in which that's taken forward. Your second question was what, Belinda? Sorry, if you could repeat.
Was around
that.
measuring impact.
Impact, yes. It's a very, very difficult thing to measure. Each of the proposals that are submitted need to highlight the impact that they expect to receive, be it economic growth within the company themselves, productivity or resilience benefits to the sector as a whole and to the primary producers, and perhaps going beyond that into Elizabeth's world of trade and investment, attracting new investment or driving exports and so on. That second part and assessing the growth clearly comes after the projects have been funded and can take 1 to 5 years before you start to realize these impacts. So we're continually trying to measure that and highlight the areas of success that become apparent.
And being patient and sticking with it and following the journey, I guess, is you're not going to get those impacts in 6 months.
I'm afraid that's true, that particularly when you're dealing with a biological function, when you've got annual production cycles, when you've got the variability of climate, and when you've got the variability of market price, global commodities and so on, and disruptions to trade as we've seen through the pandemic, all of these things create a very complex environment to measure impact. But trying to understand the rate at which we accelerate the uptake and adoption of new technologies is something that we're working on as well, to see the extent to which these new innovations are actually driving into the primary production field.
Sure. And while you have the talking stick, Callum, there's been a question, and we've heard a lot about the successes. Why may a project not achieve its potential? Why may it not get to where everybody hopes and expects it would be through the process? Any key features?
Well, it's a very, very important point. If I may, I just make the point that we've always said that if we're not funding some projects that fail, then we're not funding the right portfolio of projects, because our remit is to de-risk investment, to make things happen that would not otherwise go ahead because of the risks. Now, if those risks become apparent during the life of a project, I mentioned some of them, be it commodity price, be it technology challenges, be it climatic issues with regard to field trials, disease or any kind of biotic or abiotic stresses that throw something off course. These can all be valid reasons for something not going ahead. Equally, we have the business imperative behind projects. We've got consortia that are taking these projects forward. And in some cases, for reasons outside of the project itself, businesses fail. People move on, businesses are acquired. The whole business dynamic continues. So in that sense, consortia themselves have to dismantle because they can't proceed. Bottom line, sometimes the hypothesis that was proposed at the beginning of the proposal was just flawed, and the project, the science, the research finds that it doesn't work. And sometimes we need to draw the line and just recognize that can't go ahead. We never seek to recoup the money that went into that project, because fundamentally, any knowledge that we gain from this, be it a success or a failure, is new knowledge, new understanding that we can use to go forward in the future.
That's excellent. And that kind of risk appetite, it's quite a high appetite for risk that government has, hasn't it? And government can take on that risk in order to help the businesses have more confidence in taking a little bit of risk.
No, that's
that
right.
kind of public-private.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're trying to identify truly disruptive technologies, where things have not been done before, the rewards can be significant, but equally the risk is that much higher. And going back to the question about assessment, we absolutely instruct our independent assessors to look beyond the risk, to accept the risk and recognize that if this worked, would it be a significant change and benefit to the sector? And not to think, oh, I doubt this will be possible and therefore score it badly. So we really encourage the risk appetite, as you say.
Sure. So picking up that point around disruption, Elizabeth, you've kind of watched almost the global agri-tech journey for the last decade. And I remember when I first started this role, everyone was very excited about drone technology as being the big savior. And then very rapidly it was around data that became, well, it was then the imaging technologies that was the next wave. Then it was around data. And there've been these sort of waves. Where do you see the next sort of big disruptors? You know, today the conference is about AI particularly, but what do you see going forward as the technologies that you think are most likely to be gaining traction on farm?
I think, well, what we've seen more recently is more around different farming systems and the concept of the smart farm, where you're actually integrating some of those different systems. That's gaining traction globally. We've also, I mean, the data issue will be there to stay. I mean, it's a key part of agri-tech in all its different forms, and how you integrate different data systems and make those available. But we've seen a big growth since the pandemic in the appetite for controlled environment agriculture, and in particular for vertical farms, where you can actually produce more locally, whether that's more around the fresh produce, and shorten that supply chain. Also, there's been a big growth in looking at sustainable protein sources and other sources of protein, whether that's from insects, both for human food, but also for feeding aquaculture, which is the other growth area. Those are some of the broad areas that are gaining traction, and again, all premised on how do we improve the local supply chains for food security.
And I guess as well as the local piece, there's also something about the role of technology in helping to, you know, we're seeing as a result of the pandemic a real vulnerability in some global supply chains. Do you think there's a role for technology in helping increasing the resilience of those global food supply chain or agri-food supply chains?
Oh, absolutely. We're working very closely with Rwanda and India, and we're looking at the whole supply chain from farm to fork, and also that whole aspect of the cold chain, and how can we integrate the cold chain to protect what is harvested, because so much that is harvested is lost in the field. Then we have the losses through transport, then we have losses at the consumer end. And if we can actually prevent those losses, that means we actually have to produce slightly less food, and we have more a chance of feeding the increasing population. But those systems have to recognize climate change, they have to recognize clean growth, and therefore we're looking at quite a few new technologies that have less impact on the environment, but actually do protect what we grow. and we're developing centres of excellence in those two countries to look at how we can improve those systems with the science base that we have, but also working across the whole supply chain, from the farmer to the refrigerated storage, refrigerated transport, etc.
I think I made reference in my keynote address this morning, if anyone can remember that far back, around the ice can project that one of the big salad producers is developing, using the data, environmental, weather and growth data, to build some algorithms around predictive growth models to match supply and demand to reduce waste. So I think there's a role for the AI and machine learning to almost sit alongside the biology and the logistics and the consumer behavior, almost to help reduce waste, as you say, and losses, but also make the chain more resilient. Okay, so one of the things that I know is something that everyone who's developing technologies in this space exercises themselves with is around adoption of technologies by farmers. And I think I'm right in saying that in the UK at the moment, there's a big tranche of funding has just been released by the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to help engage farmers in R&D and increase farmer adoption. So Callum, if I could come to you, what do you think are the main stumbling blocks around getting this really exciting and enabling technology onto farm? Why are we still talking about it? What's the problem?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we have gone through a significant period within UK agriculture where the support mechanisms have been counterproductive in terms of encouraging the uptake of new technologies. When we were part of the European Union, we were our primary producers were beneficiaries of substantial levels of support that came through that I'm afraid I think did encourage and perpetuate mediocrity in terms of the appetite and the necessity to look towards innovation and advancements in the productivity and the sustainability and the resilience of our farming and our primary production. Now, that is all changing. We're going through a whole new process of agricultural reform, if you like, within the UK, where we have a new agricultural act now that is in place, and the emphasis is moving away from that form of support that had prevailed whilst we were part of the EU. So that is a case of necessity being the mother of invention. We deal in a world where commodity prices prevail and the margins that exist are relatively small. So we need to be in a position where we truly benchmark farm businesses, get them to recognize the extent to which they are using their resources, be that labor, land, water, chemistry, whatever it happens to be, to greatest effect, to ensure that we are protecting the bottom line of the business in terms of profitability, and that we're protecting the environment from overuse of artificial inputs or energy or what have you. So that whole dynamic has changed in the UK. We have an age structure that is changing. It's often quoted. I don't personally believe that it is quite as bad as people think it is, but there is an increasing appetite now among a new generation of farmers that are coming forward to embrace this new high-tech, highly innovative solution where risk can be adopted to a greater extent, where the support mechanism that comes from government is helping them to embrace that risk. There is also the very real question of how a particular technology will operate in a different geographical, topographical, climatic environment. And one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So we have quite a diverse production environment within the UK, from the uplands and hills of Scotland and the Peak District through to the black fenland on the east coast of the country to the wet grassland areas on the west. So we have a diverse environment where we have to see the appropriate solution in the appropriate environment. So all of these elements come together to introduce risk and reduce the appetite, be it lack of money, variability in weather, uncertainty about whether or not the technology will work. We're trying hard to showcase and demonstrate that the technologies that are being developed can be applicable on an individual's farm. And this is part of the role of the agri-tech centres, to showcase what can be done in which environment. So we're working together with other partners across the UK landscape to ensure that we truly do showcase what can be achieved. And the new mechanism of support that you've just mentioned that's come through DEFRA is this means by which individual farmers will be encouraged to put their toe in the water of research and to start to think about what they can do to help themselves and their peers to drive forward improvements in their productivity and sustainability and resilience.
That's helpful, thank you. And Elizabeth, the companies, the technology companies that you work with who are looking to export to farmers internationally, given, as Callum has just said, the technology may have been developed in Northern European relatively temperate climes, and they're looking to maybe export to a very different environment. How easy are they finding it to sort of translocate technology that's out in the field to different geographies? Do they have to do a lot of additional R&D to export, do you find?
I think that's correct. Some of them are looking at different markets, and they're also looking at different R&D extension within those markets. Our team works very closely with the 4 centres that Callum mentioned, and we've been developing the concept of this international smart farm network, whereby we work with partners overseas and help to develop the technology in situ in a different market so that they can profile, test that technology and ensure it is right for that market. We've done something on this with the Agri-Epi Precision Agriculture Centre in Paraguay, where we looked at different technologies for a silvi pastoral beef system and looked at how 5 technologies could be integrated to help increase the production capacity for farms there, looking really at how they can shorten the growth time to slaughter and therefore increasing profitability. But I think one of the challenges is how you make that technology actually accessible to the farmer, and you make sure it is actually the right technology for that farming system.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're drawing to a bit of a close, and I would like to just ask Callum and Elizabeth to maybe in a very one sentence just share their vision for where we would see the AI-enabled agri-tech industry ecosystem going in the next 10 years. What would you like to see? If we go Callum first and then Elizabeth. So we've talked 10 years hence, we've talked about the present. Spool forward 10 years, Callum. What can AI do, and what will we be seeing in a decade's time on farm?
Well, thank you. That's an enormous question. I think we will see the challenge of labour availability being addressed with a significant increase in the use of robotics and mimic sensors. I think we will see biosciences generating and developing crop and livestock species that can cope with the extreme weather patterns we're inevitably going to face. I think we'll be seeing the supply chains being shortened, the waste being reduced significantly, and importantly, the cultural change that is happening amongst society, driving a slight shift in the balance of crop and livestock production to a model that perhaps is going to see a significant reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture.
Thank you very much. And Elizabeth, the final words to you, please.
In that context, in order to deliver that, I hope we will see a sort of tripartite support to farmers where governments, the science base and the industry are working together to help find those technologies that are appropriate, but help to find integrated solutions so that the farmer has more support rather than them trying to integrate all the different types of technology that come out. We've got to help support provision of those solutions that address the challenges they'll be facing in the next 10 years.
Fantastic. What an inspiring point to end on. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we've come to the end of our panel session. Thank you all very much for your attention and for your questions. I would like to thank the hosts, the organisers and the sponsors of today's conference for having us. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I hope we can meet in person at some point soon. In the meantime, if anyone would like to follow up with anything, the organisers have our contact details. My presentation has my contact details on it as well. So please don't be strangers. We know each other now, so please stay in touch. And it has been an absolute pleasure to join you today. Thank you so much for your attention. And I now hand back to the MC. Thank you so much for having us.
감사합니다. 마지막 세션까지 에그리테크의 여정, 전략에서 성공으로라는 주제로 패널 토론, 영국이 에그리테크 분야에서 성공적인 결과를 도출할 수 있었던 과정, 방법에 대해서 정부와 민간 등에 초점을 맞춰서 얘기를 해주셨습니다. 좌장 맡아주신 베린다 클라크 이사님과 패널 분들께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.